The football left Mara's hand at the wrong angle, and she knew it the second it did. She had been running solo drills in Riverside Park for 40 minutes, which was 39 minutes longer than she had planned, because her alarm had gone off at 5:30, and instead of staying in bed like a reasonable person, she had grabbed her bag and walked 14 blocks in October cold because standing still made her feel like she was losing something she could not name. The park was almost empty at that hour. A man walking a dog that looked like a small gray cloud. Two joggers who moved like they were trying to outrun a conversation. And Mara Osai, 23 years old, second-string wide receiver for the Riverside Ravens, a community football league that played on Saturdays and celebrated wins with gas station snacks, running routes to a tree she had been pretending was a cornerback for the last 20 minutes. The spiral she threw was her 8th of the morning. The first 7 had been clean. The 8th caught a gust of wind coming off the Hudson, tilted 10 degrees left, glanced off the curved top of a green drinking fountain near the path, and continued on a completely new and unplanned trajectory toward the back of a man's head. She heard the sound before she fully understood what had happened. It was not a violent sound. It was soft and hollow and wrong, the way sounds are wrong when they result from something that should not have occurred. The man did not fall. He did not cry out. He simply stopped walking, went very still for a moment, and then turned around slowly, the way people turn when they already know what they are going to see but are giving themselves one extra second to decide how to feel about it. Mara Osai stood 22 yards away in her worn gray practice leggings and a navy pullover with a small hole near the left shoulder, holding absolutely nothing in her hands, which made the situation worse because there was no pretending she had not thrown the thing. It sat in the grass near his feet. Orange, hers, incriminating. She thought about running. She had been running from things in various ways for most of her life, and it had not once resolved anything, but the instinct was still there, still quick, still embarrassingly reliable. Her legs did not move. Some part of her that was more tired than afraid stayed exactly where she was. The man looked at her. He was large in a way that was not frightening but was simply a fact of the world, the way buildings are a fact. He was tall and broad-shouldered and wore dark athletic clothes that had no logo on them, which for some reason made him look more expensive than if they had. His face was calm, not the performed calm of someone controlling anger. Just calm, the way some people are calm because they have arranged their life so that very few things surprise them. He picked up the football. He held it in one hand, turned it once, looked at it the way someone looks at an object they are trying to place, and then looked back at her. Mara walked toward him. She did not know why she did this. Her legs made the decision independently of any coherent thought. She crossed the grass in long strides, keeping her chin up because she had learned a long time ago that the moment you drop your chin in front of someone you have already decided they have power over you, and she was not going to do that on a Tuesday morning in a park before 7 o'clock. She stopped about 3 feet from him and said, "I'm really sorry, the wind caught it." He looked at her for a moment. He had dark eyes, the kind that registered things without broadcasting reactions. His hair was cut short and neat. There was a small scar near his left jaw that was years old, faded to silver. He was probably 30, maybe a year or two past it. He said, "You've got good spiral." Mara blinked. She had been ready for anger, for embarrassment, for a lecture about paying attention to where you throw things in public spaces. She had not been ready for that. "I just hit you in the back of the head," she said. "The wind caught it," he said, and handed her the football. She took it, their fingers did not touch. She was aware that she noticed this. "Are you all right?" she asked. "I've been hit harder," he said. "That's not a no." Something moved at the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile, more like the shadow of one. "I'm fine," he said. "How long have you been out here?" She glanced at her watch without meaning to. "About 40 minutes. Before sunrise. The park's quieter." He nodded once. He seemed to accept this as a reasonable explanation for why a person would be throwing a football at trees in the near dark. He did not ask any follow-up questions. Most people, Mara had found, treated silence like an emergency to be solved. This man seemed to have no such problem with it. She shifted the football to her other hand. "I really am sorry," she said again because she was. "Don't be," he said. He paused. "Your release point is dropping on your long throws. You're compensating with your shoulder instead of your wrist. That's why it went left." Mara stared at him. "I watched your last 3, he said. The short routes were clean, the long one lost its line." She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Who are you? He looked at her the way people look at a question they find genuinely interesting. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and handed her a card. It was a plain white card. No design, no color, just a name and a number printed in small black letters, Callum Wren, and beneath it in slightly smaller letters, Wren Athletic Group. Mara had heard of Wren Athletic Group, the way you hear of things that exist in a layer of the city above the one you live in. She had heard the name attached to the new training facility in Harlem, to a semi-professional football team that played in a league that was better than local but not quite professional, to a man who had apparently built all of it from nothing over the last decade. She had not heard what he looked like. She looked at the card, she looked at him. Callum Wren, she said. Yes, sir. You're that Callum Wren. I'm only aware of one, he said. She almost laughed. She stopped herself, which took more effort than it should have. I just threw a football at Callum Wren's head, she said, mostly to herself. And I told you your release point is dropping, he said. So now we're even. He gave her one more look, not long, not searching, just thorough, the way a person looks at something they are making a decision about, and then he said, "Have a good morning," and turned and walked back down the path the way he had been going before an orange football redirected his Tuesday. Mara stood in the grass holding his card and her football and roughly 4,000 questions she did not have answers to, and watched him until he turned the corner near the fountain and was gone. She looked down at the card. She put it in the pocket of her pullover. She ran the drill again. Her release point was perfect. Mara had grown up in the Bronx in an apartment on the 4th floor of a building that smelled like other people's, cooking in the best possible way. Her mother, Gloria Osei, had come to New York from Accra when Mara was 2 years old, had worked in the records department of a hospital uptown for 20 years, had also cleaned offices 3 evenings a week for 6 of those years, and had raised Mara to believe that you worked for what you got and you were grateful for it, and you did not wait for anyone to give you permission to want things. Gloria was small and precise and funny in the deadpan way that catches people off guard, and she had never once watched a football game in her life, which had not stopped her from sitting in the bleachers at every single one of Mara's games since Mara was 14 and first picked up the ball seriously. Mara had not been the obvious choice for football. She was 5'8", which was good, and fast, which was better, and she had hands that caught things as if catching were natural to her rather than practiced, which was the best. But she was a girl, and football, especially at the levels she wanted to play at, was still mostly a thing that required you to fight for every inch of your right to be there. She had done the fighting. She had done it quietly and thoroughly and without complaint, because complaining used energy she needed for running routes. She played through high school on a mixed team that had 3 other girls and a coach who valued results over convention. She played in college on a women's team that was good enough to win regionals twice and not good enough to get the funding that the men's team got for finishing 3rd. She graduated with a degree in sports science and moved back to the Bronx because her mother was there and rent in other places was not affordable, and also because the Bronx was home in a way that had settled into her bones somewhere around age 10 and never left. She coached youth players 2 afternoons a week at a community center on Morris Avenue. She trained alone in the mornings before work, which was a part-time administrative job at a sports medicine clinic that paid enough to matter and not enough to be comfortable. And she played for the Riverside Ravens on Saturdays, which paid nothing but gave her a team, a coach who knew the game, and 2 hours every week where she was not thinking about anything except the 10 yards in front of her. Her coach was a woman named Beatriz Cardona, 61 years old, Dominican, former college linebacker from an era when women's football was even less supported than it was now, who had forgotten more about the geometry of the game than most people would ever learn. Beatriz ran practice like a class and coached like a surgeon, precise, unsentimental, impossible to con. She had identified Mara as her best player in the first 3 practices and had never once told her so directly, which Mara understood was Beatriz's way of saying she trusted her to know. On the morning after the park encounter, Mara sat across from Beatriz at the small table in the back of the community center gym where they sometimes had coffee before the youth sessions started. She slid the card across the table. Beatriz picked it up, read it, put it down. "Wren Athletic," she said. "He was walking in the park," Mara said. "I accidentally threw a football at him." Beatriz looked at her. It was the wind, Mara said. The wind, Beatrice repeated. It caught the edge of the fountain. Beatrice said nothing for a moment. She turned the card over, though there was nothing on the back. What did he say? He said my release point was dropping on long throws. Beatrice was quiet for another moment, then she said, he's right. I know, Mara said. I fixed it. After he told you. Yes. Beatrice set the card down on the table between them and looked at it the way she looked at things she was deciding whether to trust. The Wren Wolves, she said. You know what they are. Semi-professional, regional league. Callum Wren founded them 8 years ago. They're better than semi-professional, Beatrice said. They play like professionals who haven't been given the paperwork yet. He's built something real. She paused. Are you going to contact him? Mara picked the card back up. He didn't ask me to, she said. He just gave me the card. People like that don't give cards to people they're not thinking about, Beatrice said. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. What do you want to do? Mara thought about it. She thought about the way he had watched her throw without her knowing he was watching. She thought about the specific and accurate thing he had said about her release point, which was not the observation of someone who casually watched sport, but of someone who understood it from the inside. She thought about the fact that he had not been strange about it, had not made her feel inspected or evaluated in the way that sometimes happened when men who knew sport watched her play it. I want to keep training, she said. That's not an answer to my question. I know, Mara said. She put the card back in her pocket. I'm going to think about it. She thought about it for 3 days. She thought about it while she ran her morning drills. She thought about it while she entered patient data at the clinic. She thought about it on the subway home, watching the city blur past the scratched windows, thinking about what it meant to want something and what it cost to reach for it, and whether the cost was ever worth it in the end. She had learned to be careful with wanting things, not because she was pessimistic. Her mother had raised her without pessimism the way some parents raise children without sugar, deliberately and with good reason, but because she had wanted things before and had them not work out, and she had learned that the not working out was survivable but that it took something from you every time. The smaller the hope, the smaller the piece it took when it left. Football at a level above the Ravens was not a small hope. It was the kind of hope she had been keeping in a very small box for a long time, feeding just enough to keep alive without letting it grow so large it could hurt her. On the 4th day, she texted the number on the card. She wrote, "This is Mara Osei. You gave me your card in Riverside Park on Tuesday. I'm the one who hit you with the football." She put her phone face down and went to do dishes. He replied in 11 minutes. The reply said, "I know who you are. There's a tryout on Saturday at the Harlem facility. 10 in the morning, come if you want to." She read it twice. Then she read it a third time, which she told herself was to check for any subtext and not because she was looking for something that wasn't there. She replied, "I'll be there." He said, "Good." Just that, good. Mara put her phone down and looked at the dishes she had already done, which were clean and stacked, and then she looked at the ceiling, which had a small crack near the light fixture that had been there since she moved in and that she kept meaning to report to the building manager. She did not tell her roommate Destiny about the text exchange right away. She waited until after dinner, when they were on the sofa watching a baking competition neither of them particularly cared about, and then she said, casually, "I have a football tryout on Saturday." Destiny Okafor, 24, paralegal, the kind of friend who had known Mara since they were 11 years old and could therefore read her the way other people read simple sentences, did not even look away from the television. "With who?" she asked. "The Wren Wolves." Now Destiny looked at her. "Callum Wren's team," Mara said. "I know whose team it is," Destiny said. "How did this happen?" It was not a question. It was the tone of a person who knows that Mara Osei does not casually acquire professional football tryouts and wants the full story. Mara told her about the park and the football and the card and the texts. Destiny was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You hit the man in the head with a football." "The wind. And he gave you his card." "Yes. And now you have a tryout." "Yes." Destiny looked at the television, then back at Mara. "Okay," she said. "Okay. Okay, go to the tryout," she paused, "and work on your release point." Mara threw a pillow at her. Destiny caught it because she had excellent reflexes and had spent years being the recipient of Mara's throws, intentional and otherwise, and said, "I'm serious. If Callum Wren noticed it in a park at 6 in the morning, you can be sure every defender at that tryout is going to notice it under pressure. Fix it before Saturday." "I already fixed it," Mara said. "Then fix it more." Mara went to bed that night and lay on her back in the dark and looked at the ceiling of her own room, which also had a crack but a different one, and thought about Saturday. She thought about what it would mean to walk into that facility. She thought about who would be there and what they would see when they looked at her, and what she would have to be in that room to make them see what she needed them to see. She had done this before, not at this level, but the essential work was the same. Walk into a room that was not built with you in mind and make yourself undeniable inside it. She knew how to do this. She had been doing it since she was 14. The knowledge didn't make it easy. It just made it familiar. She fell asleep thinking about routes. Saturday came like Saturdays do, unremarkable in its arrival and significant only in what it contained. Mara was up at 5, which was an hour earlier than she needed to be, and spent the extra time doing the kind of focused warm-up that Beatrice had taught her. Slow first, joints and tendons, no explosive movement until the body was genuinely warm and not just awake. She ate half a bowl of oatmeal with a banana, which was what she ate before every game and every serious training session, because she had learned that her body performed best on this, and she saw no reason to experiment on important days. She took the subway to Harlem. The facility was on a block that had been industrial something before it was this. The bones of the building were old, concrete and steel, but everything inside was new, or at least maintained with the kind of care that made new irrelevant. There was a sign above the entrance that said Wren Athletic in the same plain black letters as the card. No logo, no color. She went in. There were 14 other people at the tryout, all of them men. Most of them were bigger than her and some of them were faster, and a few of them, she would learn over the course of the morning, were both. They ranged from early 20s to mid-30s, and they had the particular posture of people who are very good at what they do and are accustomed to being recognized for it. None of them said anything when she walked in, not hostile, not welcoming, just the careful neutral of people who are also trying to prove something and cannot afford to spend energy on anything that isn't directly relevant to that. Callum Wren was standing at the far end of the space next to a man with a clipboard who turned out to be the team's offensive coordinator, a compact, precise-looking man named Henry Park, who explained the morning's structure in a flat, efficient voice that made it clear this was a business arrangement and not a social one. 4 drills, route running, hands, 40-yard sprint, a live one-on-one at the end, 1 catch route against a defender. Results would be communicated within 48 hours. Mara did the drills. She did not do them perfectly. Nobody did. The point of a tryout drill is not perfection in a vacuum. It is what you do when you are tired, when the person next to you is faster, when you know you are being watched and evaluated and the margin for error is smaller than you would like. She ran her routes clean. Her hands were what they always were, reliable, quiet, without drama. The 40-yard sprint came in at 4.7, which was not the fastest time of the morning but was in the top 4. Then came the live one-on-one. The defender assigned to her was a man named Curtis Delaney, 6'1", 210 pounds, who had the footwork of someone who had been playing this position for a decade. He was not hostile. He was professional and focused, and he intended to shut her down cleanly, which was his job, and she had no argument with it. They lined up. Henry Park called the route 40 yards, slant at 25 back to the corner. Mara ran it. She ran it the way she had run it in the park, on cold mornings alone with a tree as a cornerback, the way she had run it for years in community gyms and college fields and on Saturdays for the Ravens. She felt Curtis's hand on her shoulder at the break point, a legal jam, well-timed, designed to knock her off her path, and she kept her feet underneath her, maintained her line and cut back hard at the corner. The ball was already in the air. She caught it. She had to stretch for it. It was just inside the back line, thrown by one of the team's quarterbacks, a man named Marcus Webb, who threw a very good deep ball and had put this one exactly where it needed to be for someone who was going to be challenged at the break. She stretched, got both hands on it, came down with both feet in bounds and held on. Curtis Delaney said, "Nice." He said it without looking at her, already turning back to the line. It was the highest form of acknowledgement available from a defender to a receiver who had just beaten him, and Mara filed it away without letting it show on her face. She looked across the field. Callum Wren was watching her. Not the way people watch things they find surprising. The way people watch things they were expecting and are satisfied to see confirmed. He said nothing. He made a small notation on the board he was holding. He looked back down at whatever he was writing. Mara walked off the field. She caught the subway back to the Bronx and spent the 48 hours doing her regular life. Clinic work, youth coaching, a Saturday Ravens game in which she caught 6 passes and scored once and felt the particular pleasure of doing a thing you are good at in a space where you belong. She did not check her phone more than usual, or she told herself she didn't. On Monday morning at 9:47, a text came from the number she had saved in her phone as C. Wren, Wolves football. It said, "The spot is yours if you want it. Practice squad to start, path to active roster. Henry will send the details today. Let me know by Wednesday." She read it once. She called Beatriz. Beatriz picked up on the second ring and said, "Tell me." Mara told her. There was a pause, then Beatriz said, "Wednesday, that gives you 2 days." "Yes. What do you need 2 days for?" "To think." Mara, Beatriz's voice was even, the way it was when she was being completely serious. "You have been thinking about this for 6 years. You don't need 2 days. You need to say yes before you talk yourself out of it." Mara sat at her kitchen table, with her coffee going cold in front of her. Through the window she could see the building across the street, the fire escape, the flag someone had put on their balcony that had faded to almost no color in the sun. She had looked at this view for 3 years. It was familiar, the way things get familiar when you see them every day, comfortable and invisible at the same time. "What if it doesn't work?" she said. "What if it does?" Beatriz said. Mara picked up her coffee. It was cold. She drank it anyway. "I'll send the confirmation today," she said. "Good," Beatriz said. There was that word again. Mara hung up and sat for another minute in her kitchen with the cold coffee and the faded flag, and the particular quiet that comes right before you do something that is going to change what comes next. She had learned not to dramatize these moments, because they rarely felt as significant as they became. The moments that changed your life usually arrived in ordinary packaging, on ordinary days, before the coffee had warmed. She picked up her phone. She typed, "I want the spot. I'll sign whatever Henry sends." She put the phone down. She poured the cold coffee down the drain and made a new cup. Outside, a pigeon landed on the fire escape across the street, looked at nothing in particular and flew away. Mara drank her coffee and thought about Roots. The paperwork arrived by email that afternoon, a clean contract, 6 months, practice squad designation with a clause about active roster eligibility pending a league amendment that was, according to a note from Henry Park, already in process and expected to clear within 30 days. The pay was modest but real, better than the clinic job by enough to matter. There was also a non-disclosure clause about internal team operations, a code of conduct agreement, and a training schedule that started the following Monday at 7 in the morning. She sent it to Beatriz. Beatriz called her 40 minutes later and said, "It's fair. The amendment clause is standard for this kind of situation. The training schedule is serious." "I know," Mara said. "I know it's serious. Do you know what you're walking into?" "I think so." "You're walking into a room full of men who have worked their whole lives to get where they are," Beatriz said. "They're not going to be unkind to you. They're going to be something quieter than that, which is harder to fight. They're going to be indifferent, and you're going to have to make yourself undeniable in that room before any of them decide to look." Mara had heard this speech before, not from Beatriz specifically, but in different forms from different people at different points in her athletic life. The content was always the same. The rooms were always variations of the same room. "I know how to do that," she said. "I know you do," Beatriz said. "I just want you to go in knowing what you're actually signing up for." Mara signed the contract on Tuesday evening at her kitchen table, using the pen she kept in the drawer next to the silverware, the one she had taken from a hotel in Philadelphia when the Ravens traveled for a regional game 2 years ago. She had not done this on purpose. The pen was just there when she needed one, which was how most things in her life arrived. She sent the signed copy back to Henry Park. He replied in 4 minutes, confirmed, see you Monday. Mara put the pen back in the drawer. She texted Destiny, I signed. Destiny replied with 17 exclamation points, which was excessive, and then, dinner tonight. You're telling me everything and I'm buying. Mara replied, you don't have to buy. Destiny, I know I don't have to. I want to. You just joined a semi-professional football team by hitting the owner in the head with a football. The least I can do is buy you noodles. Mara laughed. Alone in her kitchen on a Tuesday evening, she laughed at her phone, and it felt good in the uncomplicated way that good things feel when you're not yet afraid of them. She got dressed and went to meet Destiny for noodles. Outside, the city was doing what it always did, enormous, loud, indifferent, full of 10,000 stories moving in 10,000 directions at once, none of them aware of the others. Mara walked through it with her hands in her jacket pockets, and the signed contract filed somewhere in her chest where hopes go when they become real things. She thought about the park on Tuesday morning, the ball leaving her hand at the wrong angle, the sound it made, the man turning around slowly. She thought about what he had said to her. Not I'm fine, though he had said that. Not the card, though he had given it. She thought about the 4 words that had come first, before any of that, in a calm voice from a man who had just been hit in the head, and had turned around to find her standing in the grass with nothing in her hands and guilt written all over her face. You've got good spiral. Not kindness, not reassurance. A fact he had assessed and delivered because that was how he related to the world and because it happened to be true. Mara tucked her chin against the wind coming off the river and walked to the noodle restaurant and pushed through the door into warmth and noise, where Destiny was already at a table with 2 menus and the expression of someone who intends to hear every detail. Start from the beginning, Destiny said. I've already told you the beginning. Tell me again, Destiny said, but this time tell me what you were actually thinking. Mara sat down. She picked up a menu she didn't need, because she always ordered the same thing and held it anyway. I was thinking about running, she said. Running away. Just running. Destiny looked at her. And then I didn't, Mara said. Destiny nodded. She set down her menu. She looked at Mara across the small table, with the particular steadiness of someone who has known you long enough to understand the difference between what you say and what you mean. Good, she said. There was that word again, for the 3rd time in a week, from 3 different people, and each time it landed in Mara's chest like something settling into the place it was meant to be. She ordered noodles. Outside, the city moved and breathed and carried its 10,000 stories forward into the night, and one of them, small and ordinary and enormous, had just changed direction, quietly, on a Tuesday that nobody had asked for. The Monday morning, when Mara first walked into the Wren Wolves training facility, as a member of the team, felt different from the Saturday of the tryout in the way that a rehearsal feels different from the real thing, even when the room is the same room. She arrived at 6:45 because arriving early was a habit she had formed young and maintained without thinking about it, the way you maintain habits that have never once caused you trouble. The facility was already partially occupied. 3 of the offensive linemen were in the weight area, working in the particular focused silence of people who have been at this long enough that they no longer need to talk while doing it. A trainer she had not met moved between stations with a tablet, noting things. Henry Park was in the coaching office with the door open, reviewing something on a whiteboard. He glanced up when Mara came through the main door, said, "Locker rooms are down the left hallway. Training kit is yours to choose from what's on the rack in there. We start at 7 sharp," and looked back at his whiteboard. That was the orientation. Mara found the locker room. She changed. She came back out at 6:59 and stood at the edge of the training floor with her hands loose at her sides and watched the rest of the team arrive in 1s and 2s, the way players arrive when they have been doing this long enough to know exactly how much time they need and not a minute more. Nobody stared at her, nobody made a remark. Nobody went out of their way to welcome her either, which she had expected and which was, in its way, the correct response. She was new. She had not yet done anything here. Until she did, she was a variable, and people who are serious about what they do tend to suspend judgment on variables until the data comes in. Marcus Webb was the exception. He arrived at 2 minutes to 7, a tall man in his late 20s with a quarterback's particular way of reading a room that was more occupational than personal, and he stopped when he saw her and said, "You're Osai." not as a question. "I threw to you at the tryout, the corner route." "Yes," she said. "Good catch," he said. "Good throw," she said. He grinned. He had the kind of grin that made it clear he was aware of how it landed, which would have been irritating if the self-awareness had not been genuine. "Marcus," he said, and extended his hand. She shook it. "Mara." "I know," he said. He looked around the room the way someone looks when they are checking whether everyone who should be here is here. "Welcome to the weird thing Callum built," he said. "You'll either love it or you'll leave within 2 weeks. Nobody ever stays in the middle." "Which did you do?" "I've been here 4 years," he said, "so." He went to talk to the offensive coordinator, leaving Mara standing at the edge of the floor. Callum Wren arrived at 7 exactly. He came from the direction of his office, which she would learn was also the direction he always came from because he arrived at 5:30 every morning and left last, a schedule that said something about the man that the man himself never said directly. He was in training clothes, the same kind as everyone else, no particular distinction. He looked around the room once, the quick comprehensive look of someone taking attendance without making it obvious. His eyes landed on Mara for approximately half a second, no different from how they landed on anyone else. "Let's go," he said. They went. The first week was the hardest, not because she was physically overmatched. She was not, or not entirely, or not in the ways that mattered most. She was smaller than every person on the field and faster than most of them and technically cleaner than almost all of them. And she knew this not with arrogance, but with the clear-eyed assessment of someone who has spent years understanding exactly what she can and cannot do. The hard part was subtler. It was the accumulated weight of being in a room that had not thought about her before she entered it, running plays in a system that had been designed without her dimensions in mind, making small adjustments every few minutes to account for the fact that this world had not been built with a woman in it, and was not going to rebuild itself on her behalf. She did not resent this. She had learned not to. Resentment was a weight you carried alone while the thing you resented kept moving. She put the energy elsewhere. Dion Harrigan was the defensive captain, a man of 32 who had been playing this position since college and who had the particular economy of movement that comes from having done something so many times that all the excess has been stripped away and only the essential remains. He was not hostile. He was something more precise than hostile, skeptical. He watched her the way a scientist watches an experiment whose results he already believes he knows. He didn't look for her failures. He simply wasn't looking for her at all, which was a different thing and in some ways a harder one. She ran routes around him. She ran them again. She ran them 20 times and got them right 18 of those times, and the 2 she got wrong she analyzed for 30 seconds each and then did not think about again. This was Beatrice's training. You study a mistake long enough to understand it, and then you let it go, because carrying it into the next attempt only adds weight you don't need. By the 3rd day, Dion had looked at her twice in a way that registered something, not approval, recognition. She was beginning to exist in his peripheral vision as something other than a variable. Callum coached her the same way he coached everyone else, which was to say directly, without ornament. He watched from the sideline with his board and he said what he saw and what he said was accurate, and he did not adjust his vocabulary for her or soften the delivery, or add the particular gentleness that some men meaning well used on women in athletic spaces that functioned as a kind of condescension wearing a kind face. He said, "You're reading the coverage too early, you're showing your route before the break." He said, "Weight is too far forward on the cut, you're losing a half step." He said good, sometimes when she got something right, and did not say it when she did not. She found that she trusted this. She had not realized she was going to trust this. She had come in expecting to have to fight for the right to be coached like a player rather than handled like an exception. She had prepared arguments internally for the conversations she anticipated having to have. She did not have to have them. The coaching was the coaching, equal and accurate and attached to what she was actually doing rather than to what she was. This was, she thought on the drive home after the 3rd practice, the only thing that was unexpected. Everything else was what she had expected. The work, the physical demand, the navigating of a space that did not yet know what to do with her presence. The unexpected thing was that the person at the top of this particular structure treated her as a player, just that, just flatly and consistently a player. She thought about this more than she intended to. The 2nd week brought a different kind of adjustment. The team's defensive players began running live drills against the receivers, which meant she was no longer running routes at assigned defenders in controlled conditions. She was running them at Dion Harrigan and a cornerback named Ray Castillo, who was 24 and extremely fast, and who played with the barely contained energy of someone who was still young enough to find the game physically exciting rather than professionally necessary. Ray Castillo gave her no quarter. He covered her the same way he covered everyone, which was aggressively, physically inside the rules, without any of the slight pulling of punches that she had sometimes experienced from male defenders who were not sure how hard to play against a woman. She appreciated this more than she could easily explain. Being played against without accommodation felt, paradoxically, more respectful than the alternative. She beat him sometimes, he beat her sometimes. The ratio was roughly equal across the week, which given his speed and her relative newness to the team system was a number she was satisfied with. After practice on Thursday of the second week, Marcus Webb found her in the hallway between the training floor and the locker rooms. He was drinking water and had the look of someone who had been thinking about something and had decided to say it. "Dion watched your route on the comeback 3 times today," he said. Mara said nothing. "He rewound the tape," Marcus said. "I saw him." "He's looking for what I'm doing wrong," she said. "He's looking at what you did right," Marcus said. "With Dion, those are the same thing." He paused. "He doesn't rewind tape on people he doesn't see." He walked back down the hallway. Mara stood in the corridor for a moment with the small, carefully controlled feeling of someone who has just been told that a door is slightly more open than she thought. She went to change and then went home and had dinner and went over the day's practice in her head the way she always did before sleeping, methodically, each play in sequence, looking for the thing she could do better tomorrow. She found 2. She wrote them down. She fell asleep thinking about the route. 3 weeks in, she ran the same route 23 times in a single afternoon session. Callum had installed a new variation, a double move with a hard fake inside before breaking back to the post, and it required a level of timing precision that took repetition to embed. She ran it once, got the timing wrong by a half beat. She ran it again, still off. She made an adjustment to her footwork at the fake, ran it again. Better. She ran it 17 more times until the timing was not something she had to think about but something her body knew. On the 21st attempt, she got it exactly right and Marcus threw it to exactly the right place, and it was the kind of repetition-made instinct that had no excitement in it because excitement was what you felt when something surprised you, and this no longer surprised her. This was just correct. Callum said from the sideline, "You run like you're proving something." Mara turned. She had not expected him to speak. He had been quiet all afternoon, which was not unusual. He had days where he coached verbally and days where he watched and noted and kept his assessments until the film session after. She said, "Aren't you?" She said it without thinking. It came from the same place her feet came from when she hadn't run away in the park, the part of her that was more tired than cautious. He looked at her. She looked back. A silence opened between them on the training field, in the afternoon light coming through the high windows, with the low sound of the city outside and the squeak of Ray Castillo sneakers at the far end of the floor. The silence was not uncomfortable. It had the quality of a space that 2 people have decided to share without filling, which was a rarer thing than it sounded. He said nothing. She said nothing. After a moment he looked back at his board. "Again," he said. She ran the route again. This time she ran it as if she had nothing to prove, and it was the best she had run it all day. That evening she sat on her fire escape in a jacket that was not quite warm enough for the temperature and thought about the question she had asked him and the silence it had produced. She thought about the office with no photographs on the desk and the hallway photo she had noticed on her first day, the one with the man who was not in any of the other frames. She had not asked about it. She had meant to and then had not, and the not asking had sat with her at low volume for 3 weeks. She thought about consistency. She thought about the specific quality of Callum Wren's consistency, which was that it appeared to extend inward as well as outward, as though he had built himself with the same precision he had built the facility and the team and the training system. She thought about how that kind of internal structure was usually the result of something that had required it, some point in a person's history where the lack of structure had cost enough that they had built it afterward with great care. She did not know what that was for him, she knew what it was for her. The quiet thing she carried, the 17-year-old loss she had never fully spoken about, the specific weight of that autumn, the specific street. She went inside and made tea and did not call Destiny or Beatrice because there was nothing to say yet, only things to think about, and she was not done thinking. The city was loud outside her window. The radiator in the hallway clicked and breathed. Somewhere below, a door opened and closed. Mara drank her tea in the quiet of her own apartment and tried to figure out what she was doing here. Not in the city, not in the apartment, but here, in this new space she had stepped into, this team that was beginning to feel like something real, and the particular difficulty of working for a man whose consistency she had started to notice the way you notice something that is going to matter. She did not have an answer yet. She was, she thought, not yet done running long routes, the ones where you go deep before you know where the ball is going to land. She finished her tea and went to bed. In the morning she ran the route. She ran it perfectly on the first try. The story about the missing man in the photographs came out not as a confession, but as a footnote, the way true things often come out, quietly, attached to something else, carried in from the side. It was a Thursday evening 4 weeks into training, and Mara was at the facility later than usual because Henry Park had pulled her for a film session to review her route technique against the coverage variations they were going to face in the upcoming regional match. The session ran long. Henry was thorough in the way that people are thorough when the material actually interests them, and the material defensive schemes, their adjustments, the places where a receiver with her particular skills could find space, did genuinely interest him, and it showed in the way he kept pulling up one more clip, one more angle. When it was done, it was past 8 in the evening, and most of the facility had emptied. The lights in the main training area were down to their overnight minimum. Mara packed her bag and walked down the corridor toward the exit, past the row of photographs on the wall that she had been walking past every day for 4 weeks, and that she had long since stopped pausing to look at. Tonight she paused. She was not sure why. Fatigue, maybe, slowing her down enough to see things she usually moved past. Or maybe it was the conversation on the training field, the question she had asked Callum and the silence he had given her, which she had not been able to fully put down since. She looked at the photographs. There were about 15 of them, framed in plain black frames, arranged along the wall in order of time. The earliest ones were 8 years old, the founding of the Wolves, a much smaller operation in a much smaller space, a younger Callum in the middle of a group of 12 men who looked like they were building something from nothing because they were. She looked at his face in those early photographs, and then at how he looked now and saw the difference, which was not that he looked older but that he looked more settled, more interior. And then the gap. It was not obvious if you were not looking for it. She was looking for it because she had noticed it on her first day, and it had been sitting at the back of her mind at low volume ever since. Somewhere between the 3rd and 4th year of the team's history, there were photographs from which someone had been removed. Not physically removed, the photographs themselves were intact. But there was a man who appeared in the early pictures, always near Callum, always in the kind of spatial closeness that people share when they are building something together and the building matters more to both of them than anything else. And then in the later photographs, he was simply not there. No drama, no gap in the frames, just a presence that became an absence with nothing in between to explain it. She knew his name because Marcus had told her. She had been sitting with that knowledge for almost 2 weeks. Theodore Parks, Theo, quarterback co-founder, Callum's closest friend in the years before everything, and then an injury that ended his playing career. And then the year Callum rebuilt the team, changed the roster, changed the staff, removed the photographs from the desk. He had not removed the ones from the wall. She had wondered about this. Either he had not thought to or he had thought to and had not been able to. She suspected the latter. There is a difference between making a decision about what to display in the space where you work every day and making a decision about the record of what was built and who built it. You could do the first and not be able to do the second. She stood in the corridor and looked at the photographs for another minute. Then she heard a sound from the end of the hall, the soft, familiar sound of a door opening, and she turned. Callum was coming out of his office. He stopped when he saw her. She was standing in front of the photographs. There was nothing to do about this. She did not pretend she had been doing something else. He looked at her, he looked at the photographs, he looked back at her. Film session ran long, she said. Henry is thorough, he said. Yes. A pause. He was still several feet away, his jacket on, keys in one hand, with the look of a person who had been about to leave and had arrived at a moment he had not planned for. She said, I'm not going to ask. He said nothing. I noticed the first day, she said, I'm not going to ask. He looked at the photographs again, just briefly. The way someone looks at something that is both familiar and difficult, the particular combination that belongs to things you have lived with long enough that you can look at them without falling apart, but that still costs something each time. His name was Theo Parks, Callum said. His voice was even, not performed, just even. He was my business partner and the team's first quarterback. I know, she said quietly. Marcus told me. Callum nodded once, as if this was neither surprising nor upsetting. He got hurt, he said. Championship game 3 years ago, he never came back. I'm sorry, she said. He did not say thank you, because he was not that kind of man, but something in his posture shifted slightly, the way things shift when an acknowledgement lands in the right place. He's in Boston now, Callum said. He does sports management, he's well. But he's not here, Mara said. Callum looked at the photographs one more time. No, he said, he's not here. The corridor was very quiet. The building hummed at its low overnight frequency. Mara thought about the thing she was not going to say. She was going to carry it as she always did because it was hers and not meant for this moment or possibly any moment. But she thought about it, the specific weight of guilt that is not about fault but about the gap between what happened and what you could not prevent. She knew that weight. It had its own shape. She had been carrying it since she was 17 and someone she loved had made a decision she had not known about in time to interrupt. She had never told Marcus. She had not told Beatriz, not really, not all of it. She had told Destiny once, in the small hours of a night years ago when the grief was still close enough to the surface to emerge on its own, without being invited. She was not going to tell Callum now. It was not the moment. But she recognized what she was looking at in him, the way you recognize something in another person that you have also carried, and the recognition settled between them in the quiet hallway with the photographs and the low hum of the building. She said, the teams you build after something breaks are always different from the ones you build before. He looked at her. Not worse, she said, just different, built with different materials. A pause. He held it the way he held everything, without filling it, without making it mean more or less than it did. Yes, he said. That was all, just that. She picked up her bag. I'll see you tomorrow, she said. 7 o'clock, he said. She walked down the corridor toward the exit. She did not look back at the photographs. She did not look back at him. Outside, the October city was cold and bright with the kind of artificial light that turns every surface to amber after dark. She walked to the subway and took it south and stood in the moving car with her bag at her feet and looked at her own reflection in the dark window across from her. She looked for a long time. On the platform at her stop, she texted Destiny, I'm on my way home, everything is fine. Destiny replied, that's the most suspicious text you've ever sent me. Mara replied, go to bed. Destiny replied, tell me tomorrow. She walked out of the station and into the street, and the Bronx received her the way it always did, without ceremony, without fuss, just open and loud and ongoing, the city that had her in it from the beginning. She went home. She made tea. She sat at the kitchen table and thought about the teams you build after something breaks, and whether they are different because of the break itself, or because the person doing the building has been changed by it, and which of those things was more true, and whether it mattered which was true as long as what you built was real. She did not sleep for a long time. When she did, she dreamed about routes. They were clean and long and went exactly where she meant them to. The protest arrived on a Wednesday morning in November, and Mara found out about it the way people find out about things that concern them most directly, from someone else who had heard it first, while she was doing something unrelated. She was at the clinic, entering data from the morning's appointments, when her phone buzzed on the desk next to her and she glanced at it and saw a news notification from a regional sports aggregator she had forgotten she had installed. The headline was 8 words, League files eligibility protest over Ren Wolves Mara Osai. She read it the way you read something that you have, in some theoretical and distant way, been waiting for, and that arriving does not feel like a surprise but feels like arriving anyway. Her chest went tight, not fear. The particular tightening of a feeling she recognized, the slow-burning, weight-bearing kind, the kind that had been given so many rooms over the years that it had learned the shape of every one of them. She had been protested before. Her junior year of college, a men's intramural commissioner had filed paperwork challenging her participation in a mixed competitive league. The paperwork was rejected within a week. The week had felt like a month. Before that, a youth club tournament when she was 16, same story, different people, different language in the complaint, but the same essential argument beneath it. She was not supposed to be here, and the people who had invited her had made an error they should correct. She had corrected nothing. She had played in every event she had been registered for. She had won some and lost some, and learned that the filing of paperwork against her existence in a space was a thing that was going to keep happening for as long as she was in spaces that had not been built with her in mind, and that this was not a reason to leave the spaces, but a reason to make herself so clearly part of them that the paperwork became progressively more absurd each time it appeared. She understood this. She had understood it for years. Understanding it did not make the tightening in her chest go away, it just made it familiar. She finished entering the data. She told her supervisor she needed 15 minutes and went to the small staff room and called Henry Park. He answered on the first ring, which told her he had been expecting the call. "You saw it," he said. "I saw it," she said. "When did it come in?" "Last night," he said. "Filed by the Northeastern Regional Athletic Council on behalf of the opposing team's league representatives. The specific argument is a league charter clause from 1987 that uses the phrase men's league in the governing language." "A clause from 1987, she said. "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "What does Callum know?" "Everything," Henry said. "He was in front of the league board this morning by 9 o'clock. She had not expected that, not the speed of it. She had expected the situation, in some form, these things had a way of arriving, but she had not expected that the response would be immediate and personal, and already in motion before she had even heard about the problem. "What's the timeline?" she said. "Ruling by end of day," Henry said. "The match is Friday. If the ruling goes against us, you sit Friday and we appeal on Monday. Callum has already prepared the appeal." "He prepared the appeal before the ruling came in." "He prepared it last night," Henry said, "when the protest was filed." Mara stood in the small staff room with the phone at her ear and looked at the closed door in front of her, which was a plain beige door that she looked at every time she made a call in here and that she had never noticed until this moment. It was very plain, it was very beige. "Henry," she said, "is the appeal strong?" "Yes," he said. "The charter clause was superseded by a league-wide gender inclusion amendment in 2014. The protest is technically non-compliant with current governing rules. The board knows this. The appeal is more of a formality than a genuine challenge." "Then why is the protest moving forward at all?" A pause. "Because the opposing team's management filed it properly and it has to be processed," Henry said. "That's the system. It doesn't have to be valid to be filed. It just has to have the right paperwork." Mara nodded at the beige door. "Okay," she said, "thank you." "Callum will talk to you this afternoon," Henry said. "After practice." She went back to her desk and entered the rest of the data and did the rest of the morning without telling anyone at the clinic what was happening because it was not their business, and also because she did not want to talk about it. She wanted to get to practice and run routes and not be a person who had a protest filed against her existence. She wanted to be a player in a training facility doing what players did, which was prepare for a match on Friday. She went to the afternoon session. The practice had been scheduled for conditioning and a walkthrough of the offensive sets they planned to run on Friday. Mara arrived and trained and ran, and she did not mention the protest and nobody mentioned it to her. Marcus caught her eye once briefly, and she saw that he knew, but he did not make it a thing, and she was grateful for this in a way that was too quiet to express. After practice, Callum said, "Osai, office." She followed him through the hallway and into the office, which was still as spare as the first time she had seen it. Desk, 2 chairs, the whiteboard with its half-erased diagrams. She sat in one of the chairs. He sat behind the desk and looked at her and said, "The board upheld the protest." She had known this was possible. It still landed in the specific way that things land when they are the version of an outcome you were hoping, was not the version that arrived. "Okay," she said. "You can't play on Friday," he said. She said nothing. "I have appealed," he said. "The appeal is on solid ground. The governing charter supersedes the clause they used. We will win on Monday and you will play in the final if we advance from Friday. She looked at him. He looked at her. His face was doing what it always did, which was to say what it needed to say without additional decoration. He was not apologizing. He was not performing distress on her behalf. He was giving her the information and the plan cleanly, the way he gave everything. She found that she was not angry at him. She had been angry at the system so many times, and for so long that the anger had its own dedicated place in her chest, a cupboard she could open and access as needed, and tonight she accessed it and let it settle through her in the familiar way, and she was not angry at the specific man sitting across from her. "I'm going to sit in the stands on Friday," she said. He said, "Yes. And you're going to win the game." "That's the plan," he said. "And Monday I come back." "Monday," he said, "you play." She stood. She picked up her bag from where she had put it on the floor. She said, "You prepared the appeal before the ruling came in." He said, "Yes. Last night." "Yes." She looked at him for a moment, at the office with no photographs on the desk, at the whiteboard and its erased diagrams, at the man who had turned around in a park on a Tuesday morning after being hit in the head with a football and said 4 words that changed what came next. She said, "Thank you." He said, "See you Monday." She walked out. She drove home. She did not lose her composure in the car because the anger was present and it was useful in the direction she pointed it. She was angry in the particular way that had become part of her physical composition over years, not explosive, not hot but structural, load-bearing, the kind of anger that does not consume you because you have learned to direct it into the thing you are trying to do. She called Beatriz. Beatriz listened to all of it. She did not interrupt. When Mara finished, she said, "He prepared the appeal before the ruling." "Yes," Mara said. Beatriz was quiet for a moment. "All right," she said. "All right," Mara said. "You sit Friday," Beatriz said. "You watch, you see your team, and Monday you play." "That's what Callum said." "He's right," Beatriz said. Then, "He prepared the appeal before the ruling, Mara." "I know. That's a man who decided before it mattered," Beatriz said. "Pay attention to that." Mara sat in her car outside her building with the engine off and the October cold starting to find its way in through the seals of the doors. She looked at the building. 4th floor, second window from the left, Destiny's lamp was on. She could see the light. She texted Callum. She did not plan to. Her fingers moved and the message was sent before she had decided to send it. "I know, I sit Friday. The appeal will hold. The Wolves are going to win that game." He replied in 4 minutes, "Yes." She stared at the word. She had been carrying the weight of these protests for years, this one and all the ones before it, the accumulated cost of having to justify her presence in rooms that had not been designed with her in mind. She had carried it with the specific technique of someone who has learned that you cannot put it down, but you can choose how you hold it. Tonight it felt heavier than usual. She went upstairs. Destiny was on the sofa with a blanket and a book, and she looked up when Mara came in and said nothing for a moment, and then said, "Come here." Mara sat next to her on the sofa. Destiny put the blanket over both of them without ceremony. They sat there for a while without talking, with the lamp on and the sound of the building and the street coming up through the walls. After a while Destiny said, "You want tea or you want to talk?" "Tea," Mara said. Destiny got up and made it. The tea was good. Mara drank it. The anger sat in her chest and she breathed around it, and after a while it was not smaller but it was more manageable, the way things become manageable when you have people and warmth and 4 walls you trust. She fell asleep on the sofa with the lamp still on. In the morning she ran the route. She ran it perfectly on the first try, which she was learning was what happened when you were angry in a useful direction. You ran cleaner, held the line better, cut harder, because the anger knew where to go. Monday she would play. The match on Friday happened, and Mara was not in it. She was in the stands with Beatriz and Destiny in seats that Callum had arranged for them through Henry, which she had not asked for and which was simply a fact. An envelope had arrived at the facility on Thursday with 3 passes and no note attached. Beatriz had nodded when she saw them. Destiny had said "okay" in the voice she used when something surprised her, and she was deciding whether to feel moved by it. The stadium was a mid-size venue for the regional league, Not large by professional standards, but real in the way that mattered: stands, lights, a scoreboard, a crowd that had shown up with intention. Mara sat in the third row of the lower section and watched the warm-ups in the particular way she watched things she wanted very much to be part of, which was to say without letting herself show it, her hands quiet in her lap, her face doing very little. The Wolves were playing the Eastside Kings, a team from a neighboring district that had more financial resources and more exposure and slightly less tactical precision. She had studied their defensive scheme all week, which had been either productive or a form of controlled effort to stay focused, possibly both. Marcus Webb came out for warm-ups and found her in the stands before she found him, which meant he had looked. He raised his chin once, she raised hers once back. Dion Harrigan, leading the defensive unit in warm-ups, did not look toward the stands. He never did. He was already in the match 3/4 of an hour before it started, the way he always was. Callum was not visible on the field. He coached from the sideline once the game began, and in the pre-game he was inside with the coordinators, which she knew because she had been in those pre-game sessions and knew what they looked like. He was in a room with a whiteboard and his people, doing the last version of the preparation before the thing itself began. She thought about the appeal brief he had written at 11 o'clock on Wednesday night, before the board had made its ruling, because he had known what the ruling was going to be and had decided that waiting for it to be official before responding was a moment he could not afford to waste. She had inferred this from the timeline, and the inference sat in her chest with a kind of specific weight that was not gratitude exactly, but was something that shared a wall with it. The game started. Myra watched. She watched it the way she always watched football when she understood it from the inside, not passively, but analytically, tracking coverages, identifying the places where her routes would have found space, noting the adjustments the Kings' defensive backs were making after each successful play. She was running the routes in her head. 25 yards in front of her, Marcus was running them with his body. He was good. She had known this from the first throw at the tryout, the ball arriving in exactly the right spot at exactly the right moment with the ease of someone who had done this particular thing so many times that the calculation was no longer calculation but instinct. Watching him in the game was different from working with him in practice. In practice, you saw the components. In the game, you saw the whole thing operating. And it was impressive in a way she did not feel competitive about but simply respected. The Wolves went up by 7 at the half. Beatrice said nothing during the break. She watched the field with her arms folded and the expression she wore when she was processing information. Destiny bought hot drinks from a vendor and handed one to Mara without asking, and Mara accepted it without having asked, and this was the particular fluency of a long friendship, the things that do not require language because the language has already been established. Second half, the Kings adjusted their coverage. Mara saw it immediately. They were doubling the inside routes, betting that without her the Wolves' outside options were thinner. They were not wrong. Ray Castillo, lined up as outside receiver for the game, was fast and willing and technically solid, but the Kings had done their research and they knew the situation. Marcus felt the pressure by the third series of the second half. He adjusted. He went short and quick, finding openings underneath the coverage, moving the chains without going over the top. It was methodical and it worked, which was more important than being dramatic. Late in the fourth quarter, down by 3 after the Kings scored twice, Marcus threw a deep ball to a receiver named Pete Coleman who had not been targeted all night, and who caught it because nobody was watching Pete Coleman, and Pete Coleman scored, and the Wolves won by 4. Mara stood up in the stands. She did not make noise. She stood up and she looked at the field, at Marcus with his arms out, at Dion Harrigan, who was the only man on the team not moving, who had his hands on his knees in the posture of someone who has been completely focused for 60 minutes and needs exactly 10 seconds to come back from it. Beatrice said next to her, "They held it." "Yes," Mara said. "Now Monday," Beatrice said. They left the stands and walked out of the venue into the night. It was cold. The stars were doing what stars do, indifferent and clear. Destiny was talking about the last play, the Pete Coleman catch, the way the defender had been watching the wrong person. Mara walked and listened and thought about Monday. Her phone buzzed at 9:18. A text from Callum, "We won." She typed back, "I know, I was there." A pause of about 40 seconds. Then, "Good." She looked at the word. The same word he had used in the very first text, the one that had arrived 11 minutes after she contacted him about the tryout. She had learned over the weeks since that he used the word sparingly and without decoration, and that it functioned as a full sentence in his vocabulary, carrying more weight than its 4 letters suggested. She put her phone away. She went home with Destiny, and they sat on the sofa for a while, and the conversation moved through the game and the Kings and the Coleman catch, and then moved, as conversations do between people who are paying attention to the person they are with, to the quieter things underneath. Destiny said at some point in the late evening, "You're going to be okay on Monday." "I know," Mara said. "I mean more than the game," Destiny said. Mara looked at her. "I know," she said again. Destiny nodded. She did not ask for more. She did not need more. She had known Mara since they were 11, and she knew the shape of what was happening even when Mara herself was not ready to give it a name. They went to bed at a reasonable hour. Mara lay in the dark and thought about the game she had watched and the game she was going to play, and the man in the spare office at the end of the hallway who coached her like a player and built things after they broke, and used the word good like it was something he had decided, not something he performed. She thought about what Beatrice had said. He decided before it mattered. Pay attention to that. She paid attention. In the morning she ran the route. She ran it 20 times, not because she needed to, but because the motion was familiar, and familiar was what she needed, the repetition that said, "This is real, you are here, you have built this, it is yours." Monday arrived without ceremony, the way things arrive when they were always going to. The appeal was upheld. The message from the league board came through at 9:42 in the morning in the form of an email to Henry Park, who forwarded it to Callum, who texted it to Mara at 9:45 in the form of one sentence. "Appeal upheld, you're eligible, see you at practice." She read it at the clinic. She finished her shift. She went to practice. Nothing was said about it when she walked in. Marcus nodded. Ray Castillo said "welcome back" in the tone of someone for whom the entire preceding week was simply an administrative error that had now been corrected, which was exactly the right tone. Dion Harrigan did not say anything, but he met her eyes when she walked onto the floor, and she received this as the equivalent of a small speech. Callum said nothing until practice was underway and she had run the first sequence of routes, and then he said from the sideline, "Weights forward again on the cut." Same voice, same precision. No preamble, no acknowledgement of the week that had passed. She adjusted her weight on the cut. She ran the route again. "Better," he said. That was the welcome back. She found it perfect. Practice was demanding. The upcoming final required a level of preparation that was different from what they had done for the semi. The opponent was better, the stakes were higher, and Callum had reworked portions of the offensive scheme to account for what the final's defensive setup was likely to throw at them. The adjustments required the kind of precise collective understanding that took time to embed, and they had 3 days to embed it. They ran the new sets repeatedly. Mara absorbed them the way she had absorbed the original system, methodically, with full attention, finding the patterns and storing them below the level of conscious thought where the body could access them without the delay of thinking. By the end of the 3rd day before the final, she had the adjustments in her bones. The night before the final, she sat at her kitchen table and thought about the game and tried not to think about the game, which were the same activity, and then she called her mother. Gloria Osa picked up and said, in the brisk particular way she had, "Are you eating enough?" Mara said, "Hi, Mom." "Hello, Mara, are you eating enough?" "Yes." "Are you sleeping?" "Mostly." Mostly is not enough before something important, sleep. "That's why I called," Mara said, "to be told to sleep." "You called because you needed to hear my voice," Gloria said, "which is different. Now tell me about tomorrow." Mara told her, the game, the opponent, the amended scheme, the routes she had been running. Gloria listened and made the small sound she made when she was paying close attention, which was not quite a word but communicated everything. When Mara finished, Gloria said, "What are you afraid of?" "I'm not afraid," Mara said. "What are you afraid of?" Gloria said again, without adjusting her tone, because she was her mother and she knew the difference between the true answer and the one that came first. A pause. "I'm afraid of belonging to something," Mara said, "and losing it." The line was quiet for a moment. "You built this," Gloria said. "You threw a football in a park at 6 in the morning. You walked into a room nobody had a place for you in. You signed a contract and you showed up and you ran the routes. You didn't find this, you built it, and things you build don't leave you the same way things you find do. Mara held the phone and let this settle. Now sleep, Gloria said, and call me after. I will, Mara said. I love you, Gloria said. I love you too, Mom. She went to sleep. She slept well. The final was held at the main regional venue, a proper stadium with better seats and better lights and a scoreboard that worked. The crowd was bigger, not a professional crowd but a real one, people who had come because they cared about the outcome, which was the only audience that mattered. Mara stood in the tunnel before the walkout and felt the particular fullness of a moment that has been a long time arriving. Not excitement, exactly. Something larger and quieter, the feeling of being exactly where you have been moving toward for years, and knowing it, and being in your body for it rather than above it looking down. Marcus was next to her. He said, "You good?" "Yes," she said. "They're going to double your first 2 routes," he said. "They've done their research." "I know," she said, "which means Pete Coleman is going to be open on the 3rd. Marcus looked at her sideways. "You're going to make me throw to Pete again." "Pete is good," she said. "Pete is reliable," Marcus said. "It's not the same thing. It is in a final if they're watching me." He shook his head, but he was smiling the way he smiled when someone had said something accurate that he had already been thinking. "Okay," he said. They walked out. The game began. Mara ran her first route and was doubled, as predicted. The ball went elsewhere. She ran her second, was doubled again, and the adjustment Marcus had built into the play accounted for it. The ball went to the tight end underneath and moved the chains. By the 3rd series, the opposing secondary had settled into a pattern with her that she had been planning for. She broke the pattern on a slant route midway through the 2nd quarter. The double coverage arrived a half beat late because she had been running her route slightly shorter all game, training the defenders to expect a certain depth before the break. And on this play she ran the fake short and then went long to the slant, and the half beat was enough. Marcus threw it before the coverage closed. She caught it in stride at 31 yards, turned upfield and picked up another 9 before going out of bounds. The crowd was not silent, the crowd was not enormous, but it was real and it was there and it was loud. She walked back to the huddle. Ray Castillo hit her on the shoulder pad once clean, the way you acknowledge a good play without making a speech about it. Dion, on the sideline, did not raise his hands or make noise. He looked at her with the expression of someone who has revised an estimate upward. She caught 7 passes that game, 94 yards, 1 touchdown, a corner route she had run so many times in parks and gyms and facilities that it no longer felt like a choice. It felt like gravity. The ball arrived and she was already where it was going to be. The Wolves won. When the final whistle went, the field became what fields become at the end of games. You win, loud and particular and briefly everyone's. Marcus lifted someone off the ground. Ray Castillo ran in a straight line for no clear reason. Dion Harrigan put his hands on his knees and stayed there for his 10 seconds, and then stood up and looked around the field with the specific expression of a man who had done what he came to do. Mara stood in the middle of it and felt all of it and held all of it without trying to name it, because some moments are too full for a single word. Then she felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned. "Callum." He looked at her the way he always looked at her, directly, without performance, with the full weight of his attention rather than a portion of it. The confetti, the cheap kind that caught in everything, was in his hair and on his jacket, and he did not appear to notice it. He said, "Well done." She said, "Thank you." He said, "Next season." It was a question that was not phrased as one, which was his way, the particular directness of a man who did not soften requests by clothing them as open choices when he already knew what he hoped the answer would be. She looked at him for a moment, at the spare office with no photographs on the desk, at the early mornings and the 23 routes and the hallway where the photographs lived, the ones with the man who was not in the later frames, at the way he had said 4 words in a park on a Tuesday morning before 7 and handed her a card and walked away. She said, "Yes." He nodded once, as if this was what he had expected, which perhaps it was, because expecting things from her with reason had become something he did. He turned back to the field. She turned back to the field. Around them the celebration continued in its loud, particular, confetti-caught way. Marcus found her and put his arm around her and said something she could not hear over the noise, and she laughed without hearing it because the feeling was clear even when the words were not. Ray Castillo threw confetti at her deliberately, which she accepted as the highest form of team affection he was capable of expressing. Dion Harrigan walked past her on the way back to the tunnel. He stopped, he said, "Good season." He kept walking. She knew, having watched him for 2 months, that this was a considerable thing for Dion Harrigan to say. She went through the tunnel and through the facility entrance into the cold night and stood alone for a moment in the parking lot with the noise of the stadium still audible over the walls. The air was cold and clear and smelled like November. She texted her mother, "We won." Gloria replied in 30 seconds, "I know, I've been watching the updates. I told you to sleep." Mara laughed out loud, alone in the parking lot. She texted Beatriz, "Final score Wolves win, 94 yards 1 TD." Beatriz replied, "I know, I was listening. That slant in the second quarter was exactly what we worked on." She texted Destiny, "We won." Destiny replied, "I know, I've been following. Get in a car and come celebrate, I've got food." She got in her car. She drove back through the city, which was doing what it always did, too large to be aware of any single thing happening within it, full of its 10,000 stories moving forward simultaneously without awareness of one another. She was one of them. She had been one of them since she was a child in this city. She was one of them now on a night in November, after a game she had played and won, driving home to the Bronx through the amber streets. She thought about what her mother had said, "You didn't find this, you built it. Things you build don't leave you the same way." She thought about the park on a Tuesday morning, the wrong angle, the sound of the ball against the back of a man's head. The long moment where she could have run and did not. She thought about the phrase she had been trying not to think too directly about, because she was careful with things that were not yet real enough to name. She thought about the parking lot question, next season, phrased as a statement, received as something else entirely, and the particular way a person looks at you when they are hoping for something and trusting you to understand that without being told. She thought about what it meant to work alongside someone for months and find that their consistency was not performed, that they coached you like a player, that they prepared the appeal before the ruling came in, that they said "well done" in the same voice they used for every other thing, not warmer, not performing warmth, just genuine, which was harder to do and worth more when it arrived. She did not name any of this yet. She let it exist without a name, in the space where things live before they are ready to be spoken. She parked outside her building. She went upstairs. Destiny opened the door before she knocked, because Destiny had heard the elevator, and the apartment was warm and smelled like the jollof rice she made from Gloria's recipe on special occasions, and the lamp was on, and the table was set for 2. Mara stood in the doorway for a moment. "Come in," Destiny said. "You're letting the cold in." She came in, she sat down, she ate the rice, which was good. They talked about the game and about the season, and about what the preseason next year was going to look like, and about Pete Coleman's reliable habit of being open when nobody was paying attention to him. They did not talk about Callum. Destiny did not bring it up, and Mara did not bring it up, and this, between people who had known each other since they were 11 and could read the space between words, was its own kind of conversation. After dinner they sat on the sofa and Mara said, "It's a good team." "Yes," Destiny said. "I wasn't sure it was going to be," Mara said. "I mean, I hoped, but I wasn't sure." "You were sure enough to sign the contract," Destiny said. "That's not the same as sure." Destiny was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What are you sure about now?" Mara looked at the ceiling, at the crack near the light fixture that had been there since she moved in. She had still not reported it to the building manager. "I'm sure about next season," she said. "Okay," Destiny said. "And I'm sure it's going to be interesting," Mara said. Destiny looked at her sideways. "Interesting," she said. "Interesting," Mara said. They sat with that for a moment and then Destiny said, "Okay." Again, the word that in her particular usage meant "I know what you're not saying and I'm going to let you not say it for now, but only for now." Mara went home to her own room, the one with the different crack in the ceiling, the one with the window that looked onto the fire escape. She got into bed in the dark and lay on her back and felt the particular quiet of a day that had asked a great deal of her and that she had given it all. She thought about the routes, the ones she had run today and the ones she would run next season, in the new plays and the adjusted schemes and the training sessions that started before the city was properly awake. She thought about the facility in Harlem and the corridor with the photographs and the spare office at the end of the hall. She thought about the word good, used simply and accurately and without excess, from a man who meant what he said because he did not say what he did not mean, and how she had come to understand the weight of it. She was 23 years old and she had hit Callum Wren in the back of the head with a football in a park on a Tuesday morning in October, and she had not run, and he had said 4 words, and here is where it had led. A team, a game, a season, a future that was real in her hands rather than theoretical in her chest. Things you build. She closed her eyes. She was asleep in minutes, the deep, clean sleep of someone who has used themselves fully and spent the currency well. In the morning, if she had run the route in her sleep, it would have been perfect. She was certain of this. And she was learning, slowly and with some resistance, to be certain of other things too.